months been for you?
How's it been? Well,
You've
it's been challenging.
You've been Vice-Chancellor for like almost a year now.
I know.
Where has time gone?
I'm probably the only Vice-Chancellor who can actually tell you that my 100th day was moving all the students and staff on the campus, off campus, and moving to online. So it was quite a moment in that sense. But I'd spent the first 100 days really trying to get to know everyone. So I had this mission that I would actually meet every single group of staff in person and have a proper, meaningful conversation with them so I could really understand the university. And on the 100th day, the only group I hadn't yet met was the HR team. Everybody else I managed to meet. And they were scheduled for me to meet on that day. And we did all agree that actually, as much as I wanted to meet them, that wasn't the day to meet. But you know what's interesting is that you know, there's all sorts of disadvantages of Zoom and Teams, aren't there?
Yeah.
You know, you get to the end of the day and you want to throw your computer away and all those things, yeah. And you don't have that headspace because you hop from meeting to meeting in the same place. So there's all those issues, but for me, it's been quite liberalising as well because I've actually been able to meet groups of students and groups of staff much more actively than I could if I was travelling around the campuses or trying to schedule times when we were all free, because I can pop into events and talk to people and pop out, and you know, I can, and so I've been able to set up, you know, for example, meetings with head of schools, which I'd never have got all together in one place, you know. So as much as there's disadvantages, there's huge advantages. Absolutely. You know, I feel like I know the university at a much deeper level than I perhaps would have done otherwise. Yeah. And all the things that people told me that they needed changing, I see living out. So I can see, you know, what does need to be changed, what we do need to do. And I'm not sure I would have got underneath the skin of the university in the same way, if that makes sense.
One thing I've heard like over the past few months is the sort of changes that have happened within higher education has happened faster than any other time. And is that the same for you? Do you think things have changed much quicker?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. When I arrived here, there was a digital strategy that had just been written, and it was a 5-year digital strategy. And we reckon in 4 weeks we'd actually delivered it, you know, because there was no choice. I think we have about 70% of the students here are commuter students, so they come in from predominantly London and Kent, actually, but they travel in each day. And we knew we'd been doing a lot of work on what we needed to do to support commuter students, because they obviously, it's a very different experience for them than a student living on campus. But actually, what this has done is actually brought that really to the fore of what you need to do. And I tell you, the one thing that really shocked me though was, I mean, everyone talks, don't they, at the moment about digital poverty.
Yeah.
And I knew that we'd need to give some students laptops. I knew that we need to give some students access to resources in the library. I don't think I realised how many of our students didn't even have access to a mobile phone, had no access to Wi-Fi at all. And so we were handing out dongles, we were having to put on training sessions for things that, because everybody, if you listen to the media or you listen to any reports about students, it's all about students, you know, using their mobile phones, about being engaged with social media.
So you would automatically assume that everyone has one, yeah.
Yeah, and they don't, is the truth. We gave out, I think we gave out in the first 3 weeks of lockdown, we gave out nearly 100 dongles, just so people could access basic Wi-Fi. And that really has made me think, as you come out of the pandemic, what we need to do to support those students. Absolutely. In a way that's much more stark, perhaps, than we'd realised before.
Absolutely, absolutely. For students who have not like gotten the chance to meet you yet, what is that one thing that you would like them to know about you as, you know, the Vice-Chancellor of the university?
What I'd like them to know is that for me, universities don't exist without students, and that when I joined as a lecturer a number of years ago, believe it or not.
Yeah. How many years now?
About 29 years ago. When I joined as a lecturer, I joined because I had been a student who hadn't had a very easy path through my degree. So I wasn't a typical, academic who'd always excelled. I'd had struggles. Okay. And I'd seen some of the things that I didn't think worked as well as they could have done. And so I joined because I firmly believed that education could transform lives, and I still believe that. And I wanted to be somebody who could help deliver that. And that has driven me throughout my whole career. So I've never ever taken on a role because of the status or because it's something you should do. I've only ever taken on roles because I believed I could make a difference. Yeah. And for me, it's about making a difference to every single one of the students that you have in the university. And as long as we can't do that, then I don't think my job's finished. Yeah. And for me, that cuts across. So for me, I know this is more than one message, by the way.
Yeah,
sorry.
That's okay. Throw it all in there.
For me, it cuts across. So it's about making sure that every single student who arrives has the same opportunities to achieve. So as you know, when I was at UWE, I talked about removing the attainment gap. Well, I'm absolutely determined that we do that here. And I'm absolutely determined that no student who arrives here should leave here not being the best version of themselves and achieving the best that they possibly can. And we owe it to those students to provide them with the best programs and the best tools to help them on that path. And that's what drives me. I mean, I love the research that we do here. I love the partnerships, the links to, the outside, because I think they enhance the offering. But for me, absolutely fundamentally is if you don't get it right with your students, you haven't got it right.
Absolutely. And one thing that I say a lot to my colleagues in my personal and professional space is every student is a person, they're humans. It's not just looking at the entire cohort or the large number of students that we have at our different universities. One experience makes a difference, and if one person is struggling in any shape or form, whatever it is needs to be looked at. So aside what you've already said, are there any other motivations that other people can pick up from? Like, what else drives you? What keeps you going? Because I'm sure you do have some bad days, Jane. So in your bad days, what gets you out of it?
Yeah. Okay, what gets me out of it is having a fabulous team around me. So if I do have a bad day, the fact that I know that my team will ring me up and check I'm okay, and I don't think everybody has that. So I think that's fantastic. Yeah. What also keeps me going is actually when I go out into the region and I talk to the community and I talk to the council, I talk to the local enterprise partnerships, I talk to the local businesses, how important they think the university is for the region. And that keeps me going because it reminds me that actually we have a real role to play in the society. And also, I tell you what, another thing that keeps me going is when I actually look at some of the amazing research that we do. So we have an institute here called Natural Resources Institute, and it's won 5 Queen Anniversary Prizes, which is just amazing. They, for example, river blindness that existed in many parts of Africa, they've eliminated in 11 out of 13 countries. I mean, that would have saved literally hundreds of thousands of lives. And I feel so proud of that team because they are absolutely committed to transforming the world. And so that makes a difference. If I have a bad day, I have a look at what they've been up to. And I think, these people, they're not just transforming a few people, they're saving lives, and that has to be massive. And the other thing that makes a difference is if you have a bad day, I go to somewhere like our simulation suite where we're training nurses and paramedics, and I see, and I see people there that I know in the future will save lives, and it's those things that make a difference.
Yeah. Are there like personal things that you do as part of self-care that we can think about?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of yoga.
Okay.
So my personal self-care is that I've always tried to have some time in the day, even if it's only half an hour, where I have some space to find a way of, for me to relax. And for me to relax is through exercise. It might be going for a walk, it might be doing some yoga, it might be going in my garden. I've discovered a bit of love of gardening. So I'm not very good though, so don't ask me about it. I'm practicing. And I also, I'm an avid reader of fiction, always have been. So that would be another way of switching off, is at the end, before I go to sleep, I'll always read for at least half an hour, because it's a way of saying this is the end of my day.
Okay.
And I switch off. And I think those things are really important. Also, I have a lovely family who look after me, and we do nice things together. That also helps. Although lockdown made that a bit more challenging, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I've tried to practice reading before bedtime, but I find that so far I hold my phone until it's time to snooze. But I'll keep that in mind. As a female vice chancellor, I'm not sure how many female vice chancellors there are out there, but in getting to where you are now as such a senior level, what are some of like the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting actually, that question, because a few years ago when I was a Pro Vice-Chancellor and Executive Dean of Business and Law, someone said to me, "Oh, well, you're senior, so you must never experience any forms of sexism." Well, I have to tell you, sadly, you do experience it. You experience it on pretty much a daily basis in some shape or form. I think one of the challenges for me was that I was always told when I started my career that I was too feisty, so I'd never progress. That's because I was a woman with a view, is my own view about that, and that I was too focused on students and not enough on my own career, which is, of course, utter rubbish, actually. And so for me, I think I think the challenge for me was I've always tried to stick to the values I've had, regardless of what job I was progressing to, and I've always tried to be true to myself. And I think once I became probably not until I became Deputy Vice-Chancellor actually at UWE, that I became comfortable in my own skin, would be the best way to describe it. That actually I decided that being myself was good. It was okay to be myself. I didn't have to try and be a part. I didn't try and have to act a role. And I think that's quite important. And I think for women, that's a really difficult thing to do, because you're all constantly told, you need to be more like this, you need to do this. Someone told me once I didn't have enough gravitas. And I did say, well, what is gravitas? Yes, I am only 5'3". I'm not going to ever be, bigger than that. But actually, you can have gravitas in different ways. And I think it's once you accept that, and you think, and for me, the challenge was always, I used to laugh sometimes. I'd go to some business meetings and be the only woman, and I was their sort of shock factor, if you like. But actually, once they've got through that, and once they accept you for who you are, over time that becomes easier. Okay. And so I think for me, I suppose the challenge for me was always my instinct, if anyone behaves really badly, is to sort of, push back very hard. And I think over time what I learned was that is which battles to pick. Which ones I really were unacceptable, and I wasn't going to just ignore them.
Yeah.
Which ones I could laugh at because they were so ridiculous that they weren't worth me getting concerned about. And which things actually was it better just to ignore for your own self-preservation? And ultimately, I think that balance became easier over time.
Yeah, yeah. So I do know I had a conversation earlier this week. So on Sunday, it was like a networking session, and I recall a PhD student who mentioned that she aspires to become, a VC of a UK university someday, and she's also an international student, and I do think it is possible. So what sort of advice would you give to someone like that, someone who wants to become a VC, and obviously from your experience you'd be in the best place to give that advice?
My advice would be take every opportunity that you can. It's hard graft to get there as well. Yeah. You need to be prepared for that journey, but accept every opportunity and role that comes your way, and don't be afraid if sometimes they're sideways and not upwards roles, because actually those sideways ones can be the ones that give you the best experience and actually enable you to go to the next level. My other advice would be, don't doubt yourself. If that's where you really want to get to, then you need some self-belief within that, because you need to be confident as you go forward, and you need to think about, why do you want that role? What is it you want to do? I suppose I have a particular view that if you want a role for status, you shouldn't do it. If you want a role because you think that's the way you can make the most change for others and actually improve things, then you need to work your strategy through that. Now, I do know some people who, and I've met them actually, who've had these really clearly planned career paths, where they'll be looking for the next job and working out what they need to do to get there. I need to tell you, I've never been very good at that myself, and I didn't do that. So what I've always, and also I hold a view that you should always do the role you've got for long enough where you see things through. I was determined that whenever I took on a role, that I wouldn't just make lots of changes and then run away, that you needed to be there and actually see what happens as you go through, because that then really shows whether you can make things happen and make things actually work. So for me, it's about, I think you need resilience, because and how you develop that is a really tricky one, but it's partly about being able to believe in what you're trying to do, and if you come to it with a set of values, I think that helps. It's about being clear about what your red lines are. So what isn't okay for you and what is, and being for those. It's about working really hard and taking every opportunity that comes your way. And it's also about learning how to, which I think lots of people find really difficult, how to put your best face forward when you're being interviewed and not be afraid to do that. And I've said that to so many people over the years, actually, nobody really knows about you when you go to an interview, even if you think they do. They only know what you tell them in often 45 minutes or an hour. So you need to be really, really clear on what that is and why you are the person, so that when you walk out of that room, they need to be thinking, why wouldn't I give that person the role? Not, why should I?
And another key thing that you said for me is, I think from certain conversations I've had, it's always where you see yourself and working your way backwards. But does it always have to follow that structure? And that's what you said. It didn't work for you like that?
No, it's a standing joke in my family that every job I've ever had, I've always said, oh, well, I've achieved that. That's great. I never wanted to achieve anything else. And that would be fantastic. That's what I'll do for the rest of my career. And then, but I am an inherently, I always laugh and say I'm inherently nosy. I like to know what's going on. So, and I also ultimately get bored of doing the same thing day on, day out. So for me, it's the next challenge. It's looking, And also, what I would say is you have to decide what type of person you are to whether it's suitable. So I am very, very happy juggling lots and lots of competing things going on. For some people, that is horrific. Now, if you're somebody that really doesn't like that likes to know exactly how things are, likes it very organized, then it isn't the job for you.
Yeah.
If you're someone that's quite happy that with lots of things going on at once, then that's fine. I tell you, the other thing I would recommend anybody does is to get a really good mentor and a really good coach throughout their career. Because that is invaluable if you get the right person.
Yeah. So on that note, would you be my mentor?
Yes. Yes, of course I would. Of course I could. I have big ambitions for you. I always have had. Where are you going to go next, Augusta?
That's a good question. That's a good question I have to answer. On to my next question for you. So as a leader, at University of Greenwich, and I'm sure in so many other spaces, how are you, doing your possible best to be an ally on the conversation on discrimination and, tackling racial inequalities? And how can other leaders learn from you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that I think the whole sector's had to confront, isn't it? We have to accept that there is systemic racism within the sector, which is, I think, a very hard thing for people to accept. The Black Lives Movement, of course, has brought that really very clearly to the foreground. And obviously, when the latest incident happened, I did actually write on LinkedIn my views about it and how I was determined as a university we would confront systemic racism and that we would be honest about it. Of course, what that means is that people expect you to resolve every issue that day, and that isn't, unfortunately, where you can be. But what I suppose, in answer to your question, what I've done is we have a BME staff network, and I've been along to that now 3 times, and I've also met the group that organise it, because I want to hear very directly from the staff and students. I also work very closely with Greenwich Student Union, and they're fabulous. The team, I have to tell you, you'll be. I think you know some of them.
Yes.
And they're fantastic, because actually they've put together a set of demands that they want from the university, and I've agreed with them that we will commit jointly to those, and we'll work together on those. Being an ally, I think, as an ally, the thing you have to do is to acknowledge that this isn't your lived experience, and therefore you shouldn't make assumptions about what someone else's is. You need to hear it, and you need to, it's the point you made at the very beginning where you said it's about the individual in relation to students, and for me this is about the individual. It's about understanding them, and of course students and staff come from a very diverse, wide range of cultures, and each of those are very different, and they have different experiences, and it's about understanding those, but understand those from a human level, so for me it's about all of us seeing each other as individuals, and not defined by our race, not defined by our gender, not defined by our sexuality. For me it's about, that's really important, and it's about me listening and then taking action. So one of the things that I've done here is I've appointed 2 equality, diversity and inclusivity leaders on race, and one of them comes from professional services area and one comes from academic area, and I thought that was really important, because I didn't want the groups of staff to feel they were more important or less important, so that was very important to me. And they've just been appointed, actually. So we're meeting for the first time on Thursday. And one of the things we're going to do is actually put together an action plan. And I'm also working with Greenwich Student Union around that. So to say, what can we achieve in 6 months? What can we achieve in a year? What can we achieve in the next 10 years? And within that, for students, there's the whole piece around the attainment gap, or the awarding gap, as some people prefer to call it. But that would be one of my priorities. One of them is around, what does decolonising the curriculum really mean? Because we have to be really careful, I think, because I think some people think it's a bit like, you know, tick box. Oh, I've added
And it's not meant, yeah, it's not meant to be. It's not a ticking box exercise.
No, completely, 100% agree. And then there's the other side, which is the staff side. Why is it we only have one female black professor? You know, and what I'm also very clear as an ally is that it's my responsibility also to speak out when I see that aren't right or aren't working and that need fixing. And because otherwise, and I know the only way I can sort of in my head's kind of try and understand how it must feel, and I can't experience racism in that sense, but the only way I can understand it, I think, is to say, what was most annoying to me in my early career was when people put me on panels because I was a woman, or they asked me to do something because I was a woman.
For gender balance, that
yeah. And I wanted to be on that panel because I was the right person and the expert. And that's really where and that's what I'm very clear about, that we shouldn't be putting people on panels because they're black, or they should be on that panel because they're the right person to be there. And that would just be one example. And and I think being an ally, you can help to achieve that.
I think that is such a good point, because even on, let's think about company brochures or application brochures as well, you do see that black figurehead, and that's not what it's meant for. Yes, people of color are hoping to see what sort of representation that there is in those different organizations, but I think it's not about just placing their picture on that piece of paper or having them be your spokesperson, but having that representation like across the board.
Yeah. I mean, role models are really important, of course, aren't they? So
of course.
Yeah, so we have Greenwich Portraits, which Mayo put together from the Student Union, and that is very much about black students and staff and their portraits and why they've made such a difference. And I think that's really important, as long as it doesn't then become assumption that you've then sorted everything out because you've got some pictures, because you haven't, you know. And so for me, it's also about tackling it at all levels. So it's saying, you know, and understanding what is it that, getting underneath it and understanding what is it that's actually stopping the progress, and how, and in a way, then removing those barriers. And I'm not suggesting it's straightforward and easy, Augusta, but I'm not naive actually to think it is, but I am determined that that's what we will tackle.
Yeah, I think, you know, in this journey, because that's what I would like to see it as, because you did speak about the 6 months, 1 year, and even 10 years plan. How can we, you know, carry people along? Because for this sort of change to happen, everyone has to be on board. And there's that phrase on white fragility where people get defensive, and it's not a case about, you know, being attacked or being defensive, but like you said, it's listening, it's trying to see it from that different perspective. So how can we, in some sense, carry those who don't see it from our perspective?
Yeah, I think that's a really difficult question, if I'm honest. I think for me, it is about red lines. It's about, there are some things that actually, if somebody does or behaves in a certain way, they're just not acceptable. And I think we have to be clear on that. So I'm not, if you're asking me how do I carry someone who's openly racist, I'm not prepared to do that.
Oh, no.
So I think you have to be really clear about what and then I think it's about creating spaces where you start to have those conversations, because one of the problems that's happened, and I see it a little bit here as well, is that people are afraid to have those honest conversations with each other, and because they're worried that they might get the language wrong or they might offend. And I think we need to start those conversations, and also if someone does say something that does offend, explain why, so that people can start to understand, they can see it from someone else's perspective. I think we do need to have those spaces where we talk together about, and there's lots of talk, isn't there, about reverse mentoring, about actually doing things so that people can understand how it feels from someone else's perspective. And I think that, in a way, the only way that you could become less defensive, I think, is when you actually recognise either that your actions, however unintended, have had a consequence, and then you do something about it, or when you actually can put yourself in that other person's shoes and see how, from their perspective, that would be offensive, and you need, or unfair, or whatever it is, and you can start to challenge it. So for me, I suppose it's about, obviously it's about educating people, it's having those conversations, it's about enabling people to actually open their minds, and that's through typical academics. It might be through reading stuff, it might be through videos, it might be a whole range of things, but it is so there is an element, I believe, around the place for formal training in that and awareness, but there's also a place for having those conversations that are much more fluid and actually enable people, ultimately, I would like to think, to come together.
Absolutely. And I think of recent, there's been lots of conversations about being comfortable having uncomfortable conversations, because it's only when that happens that both sides would be able to understand, oh, this is what's wrong, and this is what's right, and this is what I can do differently. And like you said, listening and educating ourselves.
Yeah, and it's being prepared to really listen as well. That's the other thing. There's not really much point in going along if you become very defensive. I think it is being prepared to hear as well as listen.
Yeah. In an ideal world, if you had the power to change whatever you could, what are the 2 or 3 things that you would want to see change, whether personal or professional?
In relation to EDI, or in general?
In general, for your person,
well, I'll tell you one thing. In an ideal world, I would like to see the university staff body at all levels represent the student body. So, we have 50% Black, Asian and minority ethnic students in this university, which is huge. And we don't have that percentage of staff. And as you go up to senior levels, we have fewer and fewer. So I would like to see throughout the whole of the structure representation. And I'd like to see that for women as well. I'd like to see it around sexuality, etc. But I'd like to see, because I believe that a diverse body of students and diverse body of staff is better for everybody. You get better results, you get better ideas, so that would be one. Secondly, I suppose for me, I would like to see the university itself be really develop all of its programs, all of its offering, so that every single student who comes here leaves feeling they've had the most amazing experience, and it's given them personally the best opportunities for where they want to go to next. And they'll be different for everyone. So I think that's important. And then thirdly, for me, around health and well-being, I do feel we haven't really touched on that yet, but obviously Greenwich, like UWE, has adopted this step change framework. I'm also working with the work that Steve West is leading around the leadership toolkit and holistic university approach. And for me, I would want Greenwich to be a place where people come because they know that their health and well-being is taken very seriously, and that they are supported throughout their journey here. And I think that's really important. So for me, it's ultimately, it's about having a more caring society and institution that recognises individuals as individuals and supports them on that journey.
Thank you so much, Jane. My last question for you is, and I think most people at UWE would want to hear this, do you miss us? Do you miss UWE?
I do. I miss everyone. I miss so many people. And
if you
I
start
really
name calling, if you start name calling, I'm sure you would forget someone.
No, I know, that's why I haven't. But I would say I really miss everyone, and I miss the fact that actually, of course, if ever I needed something, or I was worried about something, or I needed to check something out, I knew who to talk to, and and the staff were always fabulous, and the students were always great. So no, I really do. I miss Bristol, I miss UWE, but what I would say is that, you know, Greenwich is quite similar to UWE in some ways,
Is it?
and that. Yeah, and that's definitely helped. But no, oh, absolutely. I had many happy years at UWE.